Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. For those of you who don't know her, Cynthia is co-founder of the Awaken Life Project, based here in Portugal. She's passionate about helping men and women come to realize that freedom and happiness is their natural state. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Cynthia.
Okay, hello everybody. It's nice to see you. Let's just do a short meditation and then we'll jump into the topic of the evening. So if everybody can just sit up straight. And relax your shoulders, closing the eyes. Taking a deep breath in, expanding, and exhale, and allow the body to relax. And again, inhale. Feel the breath coming into the body. And as you exhale, release any tension you might be feeling. And one more time, a big inhale. And relaxing as you exhale. So allow yourself to just breathe normally. And just take another moment or two to feel the breath entering the body and exiting the body. And recognize that the breath can be a natural massage that releases tension and enlivens the being. So it's a very simple thing to do. To put your attention on the breathing and the sensation of the breath. But it's something we don't notice very often. So it doesn't matter if the mind is busy. It doesn't matter what thoughts you may be having or what sensations you may be feeling. Just appreciate the body being breathed and appreciate that you are aware of the breathing process. And you are aware of the sensations in the body. And appreciate that you are aware of the movement of mind. If you recognize you are aware of the sensations, the thoughts, and the feelings, you can also recognize that you are that which is prior to the movement of mind, the sensation of the body, and any thought that may be arising. Take a moment to recognize this space that you might be experiencing as you recognize that you are aware of the content that's arising within your awareness. It might be a bird singing outside. It might be a cool air that's touching the body. You can feel it on your skin. Might be pain. It might be joy. There might not be anything there. But freedom does not lie in the content that's arising. Freedom is revealed when you recognize that you are prior to all objects. All objects are arising within you as awareness itself. So thought is arising, sensation is arising, awareness of the body is arising. It's all arising within you as awareness itself. Thoughts are not arising inside your head. Sensation is not limited to only the body. The belief that you are the body, that thoughts are arising in your head, and sensations are limited to the body, are all thoughts that are arising in you as awareness, not within the body. So allow yourself to be yourself, to be awareness itself, to relax beyond the confines of the beliefs that are arising. Allow yourself to be free as awareness itself, not limited to an idea that's based on history, feeling, or just another thought. The body may be experiencing pain, but you as awareness is prior to the pain. So allow yourself to rest. You don't need to change any aspect of your experience because it's all just content arising. You don't need to have a particular experience. Because you are prior to all experience. You are not limited to this experience or that experience. You are free. As awareness itself. So be still. Be quiet. Experience spaciousness, limitless possibilities. Freedom, ease of being. Freedom is not dependent upon a quiet mind. It's not dependent upon a pain-free body. It's not dependent upon anything. Because it's not dependent upon anything, there's no reason to try to create anything or reject anything. Everything already is exactly as it is. Doesn't matter what you try to do, what you try to create, what you try to change. It always is exactly as it is. So take a deep breath in. Again, feel the breath entering the body. And exhale, releasing. And again, inhale. And be aware that you feel the breath entering the body. And you were also prior to the breath and the body. As you exhale, release. And one more time, just take a deep breath in and feel the breath. Enjoy the feeling. And as you exhale, recognize that you are aware of the movement of it all. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. Nice to see everybody tonight. We've got a much smaller group. That's kind of interesting because we had the Ritual of Rejection and we had so many people. And then the next week we're talking about insult, or the next month it was insults and hurt. And then we had a really big group. And now we're talking about the wound of love. Where is everybody? You think that would be the good news after going through the Ritual of Rejection and insults and hurt. I guess I'll just have to watch the recording to see the happy ending. Okay. So I think everybody on this call probably was on the last webinar, if not the last two. So I'm not going to go over too much of what we've already talked about. The wound of love is something that you have to understand the love that I'm talking about is the love that's prior to any ideas, any beliefs, any romantic love, any love that can be felt in this world between one individual and another. The love that I'm talking about is the essence of everything. It's a love that will destroy all ideas. It's a love that will challenge the physical being because of its enormity. It's a love that you can't imagine with your mind. And it's a love that's ever new in any given moment when you allow yourself to actually feel. So when we talk about the wound of love, it's important that you think of love in that way. Because most of the time when we think about pain in association with love, we usually think about romantic heartache, breakups, things like that. So that's not what we're talking about here. And it can include that, but it's not limited to that. So as you guys have heard me speak before about the insecurity and the impermanence of everything in this manifest world. So everything is basically a rising and a falling away in every moment. There's nothing solid. It feels like everything is solid, but actually nothing is solid. A thought is arising and a thought falls away. You know, pain arises and pain falls away. So it's like a constant state of change and a constant state of insecurity. So because that's the nature of the world that we live in, there really is no such thing as security in this world. You can't find security in a relationship. You can't find it in another person. You can't find it in the amount of money you have. You can't find it in your emotions. You can't find it in how you feel. You can't find it anywhere because security actually doesn't exist. Why? Because if everything's arising and falling in every moment, there is nothing that's static. There is nothing that's constant in this world, in things. Okay? The only thing, which is not a thing, that never changes, is basically consciousness itself. Because everything that's arising and falling away is a modification of that one that is prior to or before any of this fluctuating objects that are arising within our awareness. So I wanted to give you a taste of that in the meditation, because you can be aware of the body breathing. So you can recognize very simply, I am that which is aware. I'm not just the breath of the body. You can be aware of the pain you might be feeling, but you are not necessarily the pain, because you can recognize I am aware of the pain that I'm feeling in the body. So this is very important. It's very simple, but it's very important because so often we're so connected to the objects where we think we're going to find happiness and love in the objects. We miss the simple truth that we are not the objects, and we can never find happiness in an object. Why? Because we're insisting that I am a separate entity and there is an object that's going to make this entity feel loved, be happy. It's all based on impermanence. It's all based on insecurity, and it's all based on a belief that this body mind is separate and it's going to find something outside of itself in order to make me feel loved. Okay? So when we talked about the ritual of rejection, this is basically what the ritual of rejection is. It's a chronic belief, or you could say a chronic complaint that we all have, that we feel like we've been rejected. And it plays out in the way of you do not love me. It plays out in our experience of I am not lovable. Sometimes it'll play out in the way of like, I'm not worthy. Something's wrong with me. But really, if you take it down, you'll recognize that underneath there's just a belief that says, I am not lovable. No one loves me. It's the ultimate victim position. Okay, so if you think about this, sometimes when I say this, I think it's hard for people sometimes to actually connect to this ritual, because these beliefs are actually in there so deep and they're so habitual that we actually don't even know we believe them. But we've been doing quite a lot of work on this in our community, and there's a lot of people on the call tonight from the community. And what lots of people are finding is that this ritual of rejection is going on all the time. And it's making a lot of sense in their own experience of why they chronically complain about not being loved, why they're constantly looking for love outside of themselves. It's because of this rejection, this belief that I'm rejected. So what that does is it creates a cycle of suffering, because if I think, oh, you do not love me, I am unlovable. You see, I'm never going to be happy. I'm always going to feel that something's missing. I'm always going to be feeling that you're doing something to me or you're not giving me what I need. And when that happens, it makes me angry, makes me upset. And then I want to retaliate. And then how do I retaliate? I retaliate by holding back love. Now it's sad because not only are we believing that we're unlovable and that we're being rejected and we're not loved, but when we're taking that position in life, we're not even able to receive the love that's actually coming to us from others in any given moment. You just can't see it because you're blinded by this, you could say, a mask of rejection. So that's the sad part. So then when we talked about the insult and the hurt, so when you take something as a rejection, you're taking life as an insult, you're taking the person in front of you as an insult, you're taking your own mind as an insult. And an insult basically means that I am a separate individual and there's something doing something to me. I'm victimized, I'm not getting what I need, I don't like it, life is unfair, everybody's doing, hurting me in some way. It's a very personal way to live. It's a very contracted way to live, but it's going on all the time. And what it sets up a cycle of seeking. You're constantly seeking outside of yourself for love. Because all of us want to be loved and we want to love. There is something inherent in human beings that do want to love and to be loved. Isn't that true? And then there's an impulse. Okay, it's like, I want to be loved. It's a natural impulse. But in that impulse of love, when we create a story around it, we say, I want to be loved. The problem is that we're insisting we're not already loved. So if you say yourself, I want to be loved, you see, you are actually articulating the belief that you're not already love. It's the same thing with happiness. I want to be happy. And then the idea is like, I'm not happy. I want to be happy, but I'm not happy now. When the ultimate truth of our existence is that who we are as awareness, as consciousness itself, our natural state is one of love and happiness. But most of the time, we're not resting in that awareness. We're very much attached to the idea and belief that I am a separate body mind named so-and-so. And I need something to fulfill me. And then the whole seeking process starts. And unfortunately, the seeking process is never successful because it's always based on the ritual of rejection. So you're seeking all the time. Everything's constantly changing. There's nothing in this world that's ever going to bring you the love that you're actually looking for, because the love that you're actually looking for is prior to this world. And it's animating everything in this world. So that's the clue. Because if it's animating everything in this world, then that means we're surrounded by love all the time. But because we're operating from this ritual of rejection, we never see it. We don't recognize it. But if we take life as a hurt, if we take situations as a hurt, if we feel pain, because we are human beings, we are going to feel we are going to feel pain. We are going to feel rejected at times, and maybe there's times we actually are rejected. So we are going to feel pain. But the difference between an insult, taking something as an insult, and taking something as a hurt is the willingness to feel. It's that simple. If you take something as an insult, it's an unwillingness to feel. You basically just shut down. You do not feel. You think you're feeling because it's painful, but really what you're associating with is the separate sets of self that's only relating to its mind. It's kind of like, you rejected me, which is not actually probably the case. Sometimes it is, sometimes not. But if you're in this ritual of rejection, you're actually creating the rejection yourself with the way you're relating to your human experience. You are creating the feeling of rejection. Now, even if you're rejected, you see, you don't have to take it as an insult. You can feel the rejection, fully feel it. And when you allow yourself to feel it and you feel through it, then you will feel a hurt. You will feel pain. But if you really stay with it, what will happen is you will burn through and see through that pain. It is not the pain that you think it is. Basically, the pain, when you allow yourself to feel through it, you'll recognize that it's actually the love that you've been looking for. So this is an important thing. You cannot do this without feeling. So this whole teaching is about the wound of love. So let's kind of recap a little bit. So why is it called the wound of love? And also in this teaching, Adi Da, who's the person that he's a spiritual master that put this teaching out. And what he says the wound of love will never heal. So if you think about that, most of the time we want to get rid of pain. We want the pain to finish. We don't want to feel pain. We just want it to be over. But he's saying the wound of love will never heal. So what he means by the wound of love, he means the willingness to fully feel, to actually love another, even though you know that that person or that animal is going to die, because all of us are in a transitory situation. We're all dying at this very moment. So can you love another fully? Can you fully love knowing that the person that you're loving fully is actually going to leave you, or you're going to leave them when you die? See, most of the time we don't want to feel the pain of loss, the pain of death. So we hold back from loving. It's very intense and very alive to actually love fully in the face of impermanence. We live in a world, the situation is just what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. There is no security here in this world. There is nothing that's going to bring you to this place of love that I'm talking about, that you're going to get from another person or a relationship. The love that I'm talking about is when you're willing to love life, when you're willing to love another person, and you're willing to love them knowing that they're going to leave or you're going to leave. You're willing to love in the face of that. You see, you're going to access a love that has nothing to do with the romantic love and the love that's full of, that we're searching for as far as security. The only way that you can avoid pain is to not love. Does everybody understand? Because if you avoid pain, then you are taking pain as an insult. And then you're going to react, you're going to retaliate, you're going to shut down because you don't want to feel it. If you don't feel, you cannot love. It's that simple. It's very absolute, and sometimes absolute truths, they're a bit hard to take because we don't like it when things are absolute. We want, the Hollywood romantic thing. And even if we're really cool and we think we're really spiritual, everybody has the ideal, I want to be in the Hollywood beautiful relationship, whatever that means like for you. But usually what it means is the person is amazing, they're beautiful, you get along fantastic, they're never going to die, it's all going to go great, and it's never like that because human beings are involved. It's never like that. So anyway, I want you to understand, I think the most important part of this is the wound of love. It's the wound of love. It's not the wound of pain. It's the wound of love. So in order to love, you have to be willing to feel and feel through pain. And when you feel through pain, what you're doing is you're basically feeling through and burning through egoic ideas that you have that are coming from the insistence that you're separate and that pain is negative. But if you're willing to stay and actually feel it, it will break your heart wide open. It will feel like a wound because a broken heart is wide open and you feel vulnerable. You feel, it's intense. And usually we want to avoid intensity because it's too out of control. But when we avoid intensity, we also avoid ecstasy and life and aliveness, So just think about it. You let the pain in, you feel through it, it blows the heart wide open. You get in touch with a love that is prior to anything you can imagine. You feel the pain of it, but the pain transmutes to love, and you still may experience pain, but it no longer has the same hold on you, and it doesn't have the same edge. And you don't actually even want to get away from it anymore. Because usually we want to get away from pain. And the problem is, if you're constantly avoiding pain, you're constantly avoiding love, and you will never find what you're looking for. So pain is actually the doorway. It's like the ticket. It's the ticket to ecstasy and bliss and love. And it's the ticket that if you're able to receive the ticket and burn through it and feel it, you'll recognize that pain is actually love itself. It couldn't be anything other, because everything in this manifest world is all arising out of the same source. It's all made out of the same stuff, you could say. It's all love. You could say that, everything is God. So if everything is God and the essence of God is love, then you can say everything is love. So that means you'd have to include everything in everything. You can't just take the things you like and the rest of it is something other than God or love. All of it is love. So it really comes down to, what's your relationship to life? Is your relationship to life one of an insult? Which is basically, I'm a separate self here and something's doing something to me and I don't like it. I want it to be a different way. I have an idea of how it should be. I know how it should be, and I know it's not this. That's how most people live. That's probably how a lot of you live. So it's quite a big deal for us to start taking life as a hurt And it's quite a big deal for human beings to actually feel, to really feel, and not just feel and think with your mind, but full bodily feel, receive whatever it is that's happening. You don't have to make it into some weird kind of spiritual experience, like, oh my God, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, it's all amazing or whatever. It's not that, because there is no separate self that you have to impose onto this picture. Fully feeling is when you sacrifice this body mind and you give this body mind to truth. And when you give the body mind to truth, the body mind is still here. You're still here. You're still a functioning human being. You're still going to feel things. But the sacrifice of giving yourself over to that which is true, which means there is no separate self and everything is God. When you do that, then you're going to, your separate self is going to disappear. And you're going to be in the same body, you're going to be in the same world, but your whole life is going to be different. And it's not going to be different how you might imagine it. It's not going to, be different where all of a sudden your brain is blown, your heart is blown wide open, and you know who you are, you know what you're doing, you're running around in bliss all the time. It may not look like that. Maybe it's going to be difficult. Maybe you're going to have to make effort. Maybe you'll recognize that the pain that you've been running away from is actually the bliss that's always been here. So maybe you're going to be tired sometimes. Maybe your body's going to be sick. But you see, freedom is not dependent on any particular situation. Freedom is always here and now. Love is always the basis of everything. And if you're trying to avoid anything, you're avoiding the truth that love is everything. So the wound of love is really a great gift for all of us to recognize and to receive. Are you guys seeing? I have a cat walking behind me. It's just a great gift for all of us to receive. But this word wound is not something that we usually want as a gift. It's usually what we want to return. We don't really want to receive it. But in this case, we do want to receive it, because if you want the wound to go away, then you're not going to be able to love. And it's just the way it is. And there's something about accepting things as they are. It's very simple. It takes away all the complexity of your life. It's super, super simple. And it's in that simplicity that you'll actually find what you've always been looking for. You're not going to find it in the complexity. You'll find it in the simplicity, and then you'll see that being a human being is actually quite complex. But if you're on the other side and you're looking at life from a different perspective, you'll actually be able to see the simplicity in the complexity. Because some of us live, very crazy lives. So simplicity is the essence of what is. If there's only one, and that one is animating everything, then it can't get much more simple than that. It's only when we add in two, we add the other, and not to mention the many that we think live inside our head. So the wound of love is something very, very beautiful. And sometimes it hurts. And sometimes it doesn't. But it doesn't matter, because it's all love. So that's really that's the point I want to get across to everybody. And then you won't live a life of chronically complaining that you're not loved. It won't even occur to you. So anyway, that's kind of what I have to say. So let's just take a moment to sit with that for a minute, and then we'll come back and take some questions or some comments. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? Don't hold back. Did everybody understand what I was saying? If you didn't, ask a question. Lapo, are you kind of going on, not so sure? No, it's very simple, but it's it's very hard to get it until you actually give yourself to it, to what I'm saying, and then to experience it for yourself. Because intellectually, it's kind of an easy thread to follow. But what usually happens is, because it's so simple and it's an easy thread to follow, a lot of the times we make it very complex as we're moving through the story. Because it's so simple, there's no space for the separate sense of self. And there's no space for seeking, which means there's no space for you to think that something is missing. And there's no space for you to think that you need something outside of yourself. So as we're going through that process of understanding that, we can make things very complex for the mere purpose of there's fear that the separate sense of self is losing control. So it's difficult to stay with the simplicity, but that's where freedom lies. Hi, Esteban.
Hi, Cynthia. Can you speak a bit more about what you mean with feeling through?
Yes. Feeling through is when you're actually feeling. A lot of times people think they're feeling, but they're really only having a relationship with their minds. They're not allowing themselves to whole bodily receive what is happening. So the reason, this is a term that Adi Da uses, but the way that I relate to it in my own experience is, just imagine if something's happening that's causing you, stress, and you feel it, it's causing you pain, and you feel it, but you kind of keep it away from you. So you're managing the pain as you're feeling. So you're kind of feeling it, but you're managing it. You're thinking about it. You're relating to it. How do I feel about this feeling that I'm having? You try to analyze it. You're working through it, but it's a lot of intellectual activity. And the feeling through the way I experience is I literally feel like I go through it and it overtakes me. And it can be excruciating, but I'm not resisting. Feeling through means you don't resist fully feeling, and you don't know what fully feeling is. So all you can do is be willing to fully feel. And as you do that, not knowing how long it's going to last, is you just have to feel through it. And then eventually, maybe the intensity of the feeling subsides. But the experience when I feel through something, I feel freedom, even in the midst of pain. But if I'm keeping the pain away from me, you don't actually give yourself that process. You don't give yourself that possibility of that process of going through the pain. You're still keeping it away. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I think one of the reasons why I asked, because maybe I get confused with it, is that feeling through seems to me like there's the goal that you feel through so you can get to the end of it. But what you're saying is to really be with it and without the expectation of it to go away or to happen a certain kind of way. So
Right. And ultimately you're just allowing yourself to fully feel it. You're allowing yourself to fully feel. And if you're fully feeling, time disappears. But it does something. It does something to the body mind when you're willing to do that. And it's not an intellectual thing. It's a sacrifice or a surrender. Because you want to be alive. You want to fully feel more than you want to avoid. And usually what we're avoiding is we're avoiding the pain, but we're also avoiding fear. Because it's very intense when you allow yourself to fully feel, whether it be pain or love. And the reason why it's intense is because it destroys the illusion of the separate self when you fully receive something. So that's why there's fear. Because it's the dissolution of the self that you know yourself to be. But it's the dissolution of the illusion of the separate self. It's not true that that's who you are. Because you know what it's like, Esteban. You know what it's like when you feel, but you're analyzing it all the time, right? And it doesn't really pierce you. The feeling doesn't pierce the heart. It might feel really bad, but there's a way that you're still in control. And there's a way that you're still managing how far you're willing to go. So when I'm talking about fully feeling or feeling through, I'm talking about not managing and not controlling it. Does that help?
yeah,
Yeah, because it's literally like, it can be so excruciating. It's a process of purification because you're burning through the resistance. And it can be excruciating. I mean, really excruciating. But there's something about as you're fully feeling and you're not taking whatever's happening to you as an insult in that moment, you see, it can be excruciating and it can be good. You can actually be consciously aware during this purification process of the beauty of it, and it's still excruciating. But it's no longer, you don't have the same, you could say, point of view, because your point of view, you've let go of the separate self in that moment you're willing to fully feel. So your point of view is no longer coming from the self, the small self, that's trying to protect itself, trying to understand something, trying to maintain something, trying to manage something, trying to control something, trying to get somewhere. That self is being relinquished. It's being sacrificed in that moment. And then that's why there's love. And the wound of love is really just all about the willingness to live that all the time and to love fully, even when there's impermanence and everything is going to die, or you're going to die. Does anybody recognize the movement of holding back love because you don't want to face the pain of death? So it's like whether it be with a friend, with a partner, with an animal that you love. And you might notice that as that animal or that person is getting older and older, it's very easy to kind of start and be, kind of create a little bit of space or like a buffer that will make it easier. So when they do go, you've already kind of separated. Anybody notice that in their life? You see, so can you fully love up until the moment of death? And it doesn't even have to be physical dying. Can you fully love not knowing if, if your relationship is going to last? Can you fully love even in the face of rejection? See, it's beautiful because you can actually choose how to receive life. You receive it as a hurt, which means you receive love and you fully feel, or you receive it as an insult, you reject, and then you retaliate. So what can be more beautiful than the wound of love, if you think about it? What can be more beautiful than fully loving with no with no security, no guarantee that your separate self will get all the things that you think you need? You see, this is the play. It's like the separate self is displaced when you're willing to actually live the wound of love. The separate self is displaced. Now, of course, sometimes you recognize that fully, but because we're all kind of works in process, we're all going through a purification process. It doesn't mean that you're going to understand what I'm saying, and then all of a sudden you're just going to go, oh, I'm going to take everything as a hurt, and then I'm going to feel the wound of love, and everything's going to be great. It doesn't really work like that. It can in any given moment, but then it's a day-to-day, moment-to-moment sacrifice. Just because you give yourself over in this moment, it takes courage, it takes commitment to want to live in that kind of aliveness and intensity and truth. It takes commitment to be ecstatically happy. It takes commitment to live in a way where love is just tearing you apart. Everybody says they want to be happy and they want to be loved, but can you take the intensity of happiness, real happiness and real love? You don't know till you get there. Everybody likes to put their toe in the pond, but how many people want to jump in, right? But can you take that intensity? Everybody's like, yeah, let me give it a try, right? I'm willing to give it a try, see if I like it. Well, that's cool. Start there. But it's really about feeling. And why would you not want to feel? The only reason you wouldn't want to feel is because you want to avoid it. Okay, Albert, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, you struck a chord with me. A good one. Yeah, so to me, this is about suffering, and love is typically in relationship, to whether it's another human or another or something, right? And I'm getting the notion, and now I'm relating to some metaphors I have in my own life, that, when I suffer in relationship now, and I think I used the term last year about heartgasms, when I suffer in relationship, it's now looked at in terms of how do I live with the agony of this suffering and the ecstasy, because what comes out of that suffering is something so much better than would have existed otherwise with just the plain suffering. And it's through that balancing of the agony and the ecstasy, almost that Christ metaphor, right? Of saving the world, but suffering to get there. The creativity that I bring into that exercise, because it is difficult, especially when you're up against a wound, whether it's love or rejection or whatever. My prevailing wound is guilt. That's what stops me from shutting me off. But balancing all these things and having the awareness that, my grace comes with the grace that comes in through me, that bliss, that happiness, whatever the term is, I call it grace. Can only be achieved by, like you said, going through that suffering, but realizing what's at the other end of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have found that when you don't move away from suffering, that you find a love that's prior to all of suffering, and that is not, doesn't really have anything to do with, I could say it doesn't really have to do with all the things you were holding on to. Because usually when you go through suffering and you transcended rejection or even guilt, you have a lot of ideas about rejection and guilt, and you have a lot of ideas about what it means in relationship to you as a separate self. And when you're willing to suffer through, and you're willing to feel pain, or you're willing to feel the guilt or the rejection, and fully feel it, just feel it with no expectation, no nothing, it will transcend that separate self. And then the guilt, you may still feel guilt, you may still feel pain, but it doesn't have the same meaning anymore, because it's no longer tied to all the ideas that are connected to the separate self. It's no longer, the ideas that you have are no longer a reference point of telling you who you are. They're just ideas that are burned up in the willingness to sacrifice those ideas.
Yeah, I get that. And how I think I deal with that, and I learned this at the retreat, well, that was the seed that was planted, is that when I see myself being victimized, let's say by somebody else, I now own that as my own feeling. And that freedom flows out of owning that.
Well, it's owning it as your own feeling, which means you don't react, you don't retaliate, right?
Which I don't retaliate, right? Which brings me into that stream of love. I'm already now in that stream because I've overcome that rejection or that fear or that, desire.
Well, if I put it into the context of this teaching we've been talking about, you take it as a hurt and you don't take it as an insult. And so when you don't take it as an insult, you're not retaliating. You take it as a hurt, you feel it, you don't retaliate, you receive it, and it transcends. the separate sense of self. And that's where the happiness and the love comes in. It's not anything that you've actually changed. Nothing has changed other than the fact that you have received the hurt and you haven't retaliated, and the separate self is displaced in that moment. And
Well,
then
I
you
think
get
I've
into
actually accepted, I've accepted the feeling, and I've almost embraced it,
right.
and have created, and this takes a big pause beforehand, because the instant response is to just retaliate. So it's almost like you
Right.
got to go mute. You got to go mute for however long, right? But
Right.
at some point, you're embracing it. You're embracing it after you allow it to flow into you, and you accept it as, you know, that you're going to own this, and then you embrace it as something quite beautiful. And that's where the bliss flows, even though nothing has really changed with the situation other than those words that we both used.
Well, nothing changed in the situation, but everything's changed because of the perspective from which you're receiving the situation.
That's correct. I would have said that, but I didn't have the words. That, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, but the one thing that I
It's
would
a
say,
transmutation.
yeah. And one thing I would say, though, is if you can take out of your vocabulary that you are doing anything in the midst of all this, because you sound like the creativity is flowing through you and things are happening. You see, there is no you that the creativity is flowing through. There's just creativity happening. There's just something happening. There is no you that's creating it. And the thing that's very interesting is you actually, you know, when we think about, and this is a whole different topic that we could talk about, but we actually don't know what anything actually is. So we have lots of words for all the things, we describe it as if we think we know. But when you really feel into what you just described as your experience, you know, and I know it's difficult to describe it, but when you really feel into it, you see, you don't even know what it is. You're at the mercy of what's ever happening. And the separate self is no longer, you know, you're no longer imposing that onto the situation. You've basically just allowed what is to be what is. And we don't know what that is.
Yeah. Yep. No, you know, I haven't yet been able to scrap I from my vocabulary, or me, but I do recognize when I have surrendered to something else and I have no clue as to why it's happening. It has to be from something else, but I don't understand it.
What if
And
it doesn't have to do with something else? What if it just is? Because there is no something else.
yeah, I could accept that too. And you know, I don't own it as me. I think
Right.
that's what I'm trying to say. I don't own it as me. And never has the Christ metaphor been so profound in my life in terms of, you know, that representing in human terms what suffering and agony and ecstasy is, and how I now apply that to these, you know, rejection and some of these other wounds. I'll call them sacred wounds, core wounds, whatever the word is very profound. I still have that Western synthesis in my head. I can't undo it at my age, right? Easily. I have been, but
No,
you know, I'm somewhat calcified.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You see, even talking about yourself as being calcified, it's creating a separate self that somehow is calcified. There's nothing going, there's just, you know, you are not calcified. There is just a rising of thought in any given moment. You're relating to your situation in any given moment. But if you relate to it in the way that you're talking about it, then you can recognize that you just disappear. You know, and even though, you know, and then you'll come in with conditioned ideas about being calcified and all this. But what I think is you're actually experiencing the decalcification of all of your ideas. And then you come forward and you want to talk about it in a way that makes sense to your mind. And it brings you back into the picture. But the actual experiences that you have gone through, I think, are are not a calcification of somebody named Albert that never really existed.
Yeah, thank you for that. I tend to agree.
Yeah,
But I'll shut up before I go to spiritual prison here.
no, that's fine.
All
That's
right.
fine. We're
Thank
not
you
going
for
to
your
put
feedback.
yeah, we're not going to put you in spiritual prison. We're trying to get you out.
Thank you.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Albert. See, the thing is, everybody, see, we don't really know what anything is. And there's just such a joy in actually realize you don't know what anything is. We don't really know what's going on. We know what pain is. We have these ideas, the wound of love, and everything we're talking about, it makes sense. It all makes sense, but it's not going to liberate you until you actually live it. And all roads lead to the transcendence of the separate ego I, so that one can actually become immersed, consciously immersed in that which is already the case. Because in a certain way, we're all already immersed in love. We're already consciousness itself. And people say this all the time, and that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. But there's also a body mind here that has lots of ideas that is contrary to that truth. So something needs to be purified. But I think what's really amazing about this teaching of the wound of love is when you allow yourself to feel and to understand that, to love in the face of anything and not retaliate, not reject. If you're able to do that, you actually start to get a glimpse of what your humanity actually is. Because most of us as human beings, we're human beings, but we don't really know what true humanity is. So it's something that it's not something that we can know. It's something that we can only live when we're not imposing, we're not rejecting and retaliating. We're actually feeling and then being love. I have a really good quote, but right now I'll just show you. My cat is sitting on it. So I can't remember what it is. So, oh wait, I can pull it out from another paper. Hang on. It's basically, here's the quote. It's very short. It's like, the most direct way to know love in every moment is to be love in every moment. To be love, not to feel love, to be love. And that's your true nature. So how is one going to actually be love? The only way that one can be love is to transcend the separate sense of self, the illusion that you're separate, the illusion that you're not already who you are. And that's not something you just do, like that. Can happen just like that, but to actually live it takes some commitment. But it's moment to moment. Commitment is another one of those words that scares everybody because it sounds so serious and long-term, doesn't it? It's like, oh my God, don't want any of that. That's why we have to change how we think about these words. Wound of love, wound, not something I'm interested in. Commitment, too long-term, not liking that either. Pain, forget about it, go in the other direction. It's true, we're all the same, right? We're all the same. We all do these crazy things out of our own ignorance.
I just have a comment.
Okay.
What you said earlier about So you said that if you don't feel the pain, then you're not open to the love. And then you also said if you don't feel the intensity, then you won't feel the ecstasy. And that was just a different take that I'd never really heard before. And I just found it really amazing and helpful. Because so often we also want to reach from intensity, and we rather just live a very level, mellow kind of life.
Right.
But then really, if life is about ecstasy, then intensity is, we also want to move towards the intensity, right?
Right. And if you think about it, I mean, everybody on this call, you're not really interested in leading a very dull and flat life, are you?
No.
But when you think about intensity, dull and flat sounds too dull and flat, but intensity just sounds a little bit too ecstatic, right? Intensity is like a little bit too much. It's not dull and flat, and it's not intensity. We want something kind of in the middle that's a bit more manageable. Isn't that true? Because I mean, how many people want to live an ecstatically intensive life? But if you think about it, like I can say, yeah, I want to live an ecstatic, intense life. I can say that now. Because I actually understand it differently than the way that I would interpret that, that description from fear. If you're trying to hold on to some kind of control and you're afraid of losing control, then ecstatically and intense is not the direction you want to go in. But if you see through the fear and you see through the illusion of control, then you recognize that there is nothing to be afraid of. And you actually aren't able to control anything. So ecstatically and intensively is just alive. I mean, we're only here for a short period of time on this planet in these bodies. Why do we want to be dull for most of it? I mean, the only reason you would be is because there's an identification with the separate sense of self that has a lot of fear about death, has a lot of fear about losing control, has a lot of fear about love, it has fear about happiness. I mean, these are all kind of characteristics of ego. So Kate, are you getting more excited about intense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen what you just did. Wait. I go, are you excited about ecstatic and intense? You're like, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds pretty flat and boring to me. You remember we had this talk about expressing oneself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just my mind was,
Okay,
was just I just
want to tell everybody that Kate is English. That's part of the problem.
Come on, Kate.
Okay. Go ahead, Kate. Yeah, Carol's behind you, propping you up. She's English too.
Give it some.
No, I just said it. I had an insight, but I don't know if it was such an important insight. But it's about when you're saying when you talk about the wound of love, often I sort of know, I know deep down if something is true, and there's a moving away from truth sometimes, and somehow the moving away from the truth is also the moving away from the intensity. And so it always feels that there's a bit of doing this, both with, so I'm willing to cut off feeling if I can just not look at the truth. That's what it feels like lots of the time. Yeah, but basically the truth is intense to the separate sense of self, because the separate sense of self, the truth is that it doesn't exist. So if you identify with the separate self as being you, I mean, this is the spiritual process. You are going to go through a process of purifying yourself from that illusion.
And so there's going to be an intensity there. If you're identified with the separate selves of being 100% of who you are, and then you start to recognize that it's not who you are a little bit, it's going to be quite intense because it's your whole identity. But as you continue through the process and you understand more and more, you'll understand that the separate sense of self is actually an illusion. You're still believing it to a certain degree, but you're in the process of not believing it as much as you used to. So then it won't be as intense. The letting go process won't be as intense, but don't forget how intense that pure love actually will be. It will blow you apart. So it's the intensity of letting go of the separate self, and it's, you know, it's kind of replaced by the intensity of truth
Right.
and love.
Right. Yeah.
So either way you go, it's intense, but at least you'll be free and happy.
I like it.
Lola's not going for intensity right now.
Do you know what I'm doing after the webinar?
You're burning your shirt.
I'm burning my shirt.
She's breaking out today. She has a shirt that's all about fossil fuels, and she's decided she's more interested in freedom than saving the world. So she's going to burn her fossil fuel shirt. Very exciting for us that know Kate. We're very excited. Cool. I guess you'll have a lot of friends going out there with you.
Yes.
Okay. So anybody else have a comment or a question? You know, I talked a lot about feeling also. Is everybody aware of how little we actually feel most of the time? Everyone's like, no. Okay, Sandra.
It's just, maybe this is really obvious, but I just get this, oh yeah. I got this feeling that the avoidance of feeling is like the deep layer of separation, right? Because if I avoid feeling, I'm already even creating separation from feeling, which is something that I, you know, in a way I say that I hold on so much to because it's my feelings. And I was just like, whoa, maybe this is really obvious, but it just hit me. Just wanted to comment on that.
But you're saying the avoidance of feeling is separation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the avoidance of feeling has to come from the idea that there's another thing or person that I'm trying to avoid. And it's also, you know, it's coming from this place of protection, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it especially hit me when you were talking about pain, because I was like, yeah, if I am avoiding pain, if I'm making it something that wants, like it wants to hurt me, you know, so it's like this, yeah, immediately there's this separation that's completely artificial. I don't deeply believe in it, but I'm just acting out from that place of separation.
Yeah, and then, so one can recognize that movement, right? It's just the avoidance of anything is the movement to create a separate self. I mean, because you're avoiding something that's other than you. So you've already got two things going on. But so where does that leave you as far as the recognition that you just said? Does it make sense to relate?
No, it doesn't make any sense. That's why it hit me like this, like not the idea that I, you know, like I had this image that I need to bathe in all of this, in whatever comes, you know, not bathe like be there and feel intensely, but just let things be as they are. not in a dramatic way, but just not avoiding. I'm finding it very difficult to express.
It's okay. It's just that what you don't want to do is you don't want to put time into the picture, is it? And you don't want to make it into a seeking, something that's, you know, I have to do this in order for me to be free.
Yeah.
Because then it's just putting time into the picture and you're seeking. But if you recognize, it's really about recognizing the truth of what is. It's recognizing there is no separate self. If you have that recognition and that recognition goes deep enough, you see, then you're not going to spend time trying to avoid anything, because the recognition that there is no separate self has gone deep enough where you just won't do it anymore. And even if the mind, this is the tricky bit, the mind might come in and say, you know, you're having the same relationship to your thoughts. A thought arises and says, I'm separate. Another thought arises and says, I'm avoiding. And another thought arises and says, I'm not avoiding. And you just recognize it's all just thought, and it really has nothing to do with anything. It's just one thought after another thought after another thought, instead of one thought meaning something about me, another thought, oh, that one means something about me, another thought. In the end, it's all just the movement of mind. It's all thought. The thought that I have to do something is a thought. The thought that I am a separate self is a thought. So it's really just recognizing the content that's arising is not about you as a separate self. It's just content that's arising in you as awareness itself. Coming back to the meditation at the beginning of the webinar. You see, there is no you that's getting over anything. There's no you that's causing any, you know, any effect in one way. You could just say things are happening. But I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, things are just happening, so I'm not responsible for anything. No, you still are a human being who's making choices. Just always have to throw that in, because I don't want anybody leaving the webinar going, well, I don't have to do anything. I can do whatever I want and nothing's happening. So it's a paradox. Okay, so I think we're running out of time. We've got 1 minute left. If anybody's interested in talking really fast. I just want to encourage everybody, you know, just to, if you're really interested in this and you're really interested in liberating yourself from this ritual of rejection, and you just truly want to love and be loved, the fastest way to do that is just allow yourself to feel in any given moment. And let that feeling break, you know, allow yourself to feel and let it break your heart wide open. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge about stuff. You don't have to read a bunch of stuff. You just have to be willing to feel and to respond. And, you know, and that's it. It's really, that's it. Everything else will take care of itself. So don't make it more difficult than it is. Because it's not about knowledge. It's not about understanding more so that you'll feel better about taking the next step. You can do it that way, but ultimately all steps are going to lead to the same place. So if something happens in your life that is forcing you to feel, then receive it and feel. And there's sometimes stuff will happen, like the death of somebody. You know, maybe somebody you love dies and you feel a pain, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to make that pain go away. And it forces you to accept a situation. And in that acceptance, you find peace. And that's what I'm talking about. So if you can look at the life that we're living in this, you know, on this planet, we're living in a place that it has no security. We're living in a place where relationship is not going to fulfill you. It might be really good, but it's not going to fulfill the love that most people are craving for. Deep down, not the superficial love. You know, we're living in a state, you know, a place that's not, it's not full of love right now. It's full of retaliation. We just have to accept that. And then we have to do something, make choices so that we actually do something different. But it all has to do with if your willingness to feel. So I just encourage you all to do that, because anybody can do that. And situations are, you know, situations come up all the time that are painful and that are beautiful, because it's not just about feeling pain, it's about feeling beauty too. Okay, so Laura's going to do her thing now.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for the webinar. That was really fantastic. So I will send out an email to everybody in the next couple of days, probably at the weekend actually, with the recordings, and do feel free to share them with anyone you might think would be interested. And I'll also send you details of all our upcoming retreats, including Cynthia's retreat. There's a last call for Cynthia's women's retreat in a couple of weeks. If you have the pull to do that, I'm going to send you all the details. That starts on the 17th of May. And Cynthia's also doing a Wound of Love retreat in the end of June, the 29th of June to the 4th of July, covering this topic. So that will be...
Actually, Laura, the women's retreat is on the 22nd of May.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was the 17th to the 22nd.
No, that's all right.
22nd. Cool. I'll send all the actual dates out on email.
Yeah, and also can you maybe send the text of the Wound of Love. So we'll send everybody the actual text of this teaching.
Okay.
And then you can read it yourself. It's basically written by this teacher Adi Da, and he's writing it to his devotees. So when you read it, you have to read it in the context of a teacher writing to his, speaking to his devotees. It's a transcript of a talk. But anyway, it'll give you, I mean, it's an amazing thing to read. So if you do read it, just spend some time with it, and don't just read it through as if you're reading a novel. Take the time to really go step by step.
Cool. And just one last thing, Cynthia runs these webinars by donation, so I will send out details of how to donate in the email also. And I think that's it.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming on tonight. You can open up your microphones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Women's retreat.
Good to see everybody.
Yes, good to see you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Ciao. Bye.
Wow, there they go. Everybody's popping up. Oh, we can turn off the recording, Laura.